Welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by thesoberclub.com. I'm Janey Grace. This is for you if you've quit the booze or you'd like to, or maybe you're just sober curious. I'll bring you tips and motivation without any judgment, and there'll be inspiration from experts, quit-lit authors, and sober heroes. Hi, welcome to the Alcohol Free Life podcast. If you're new to us, maybe you're doing Sober for October, then welcome. You've got lots of podcasts to catch up on. I spoke to somebody the other day who'd literally listened to every single podcast. That is a lot. I was asking her favourites, which is always interesting. Because sometimes it's not even necessarily the most well-known people or the people who've written the books. But just interesting, isn't it? The things that really resonate. So last weekend was our Sober Club Champneys weekend retreat. It's open to anybody, of course. And honestly, I feel so blessed. It was such a great weekend. I felt so fortunate in the midst of everything to be able to host, a small retreat within all the guidelines, of course, but it was just great. We kind of, obviously I had a structure in place, and I had a whole bunch of stuff that I was going to teach, and then of course we used Champneys' lovely facilities, and we did some yoga nidra relaxation as well. But what was interesting was, within the sessions, how we kind of went off on a tangent. And that's often where some of the magic happens, isn't it? And I thought I'd just read you a couple of lines that people shared with me. Because I just think it's really interesting to see what people get from doing, this kind of thing. So one says here, I won't name these people, but one says here, it's my second retreat with Janey. It was totally awesome. So wonderful to bond with like-minded people. Although we're all different, we all had the same goal to live our best possible lives alcohol-free. We had so much information and tools, and it's just all the resources and inspiration that I need. And then somebody else says, thank you, Janey. As they say, the opposite of addiction is connection. And I found that in heaps this weekend, feeling inspired and strong on my journey going forward, and can't wait for the next one. And another one that says, I came home with sharply focused personal objective for growth outside and beyond the sober goals. Or haven't thinking about it, is it one of my underpinning reasons for drinking in the first place? ? Revealing, bonding, and keeping us connected. And that just kind of sums up the feeling that we had, I think. And the reason I'm sharing this with you is because I just think you can't stress enough how important it is to stay connected. It's just critical. And, when I think back to, when I first ditched the booze, many of you know, I didn't tell anyone. I did it completely the wrong way around, apart from Claire Pooley. Thank you, Claire, if you're listening, who was my only champion by email. I literally didn't tell a soul. And that's bizarre in itself, because that was mixed up with all kinds of shame and goodness knows what. But I didn't know who to tell, actually, either. So I did it wrong. I was relying totally on my own sort of strength of willpower, I suppose, which we know never really works. And I think what this weekend has shown us again, and these lovely comments just prove that actually we all need to connect. And by the way, the women were all at different stages. Some were early days and some had been sober one woman had been sober for 3 years. So it's not about whether, how long you've ditched the booze for. It's about being able to be open and recognise where you are with whatever's going on for you. And just this thing of staying connected, it's critically important. And particularly at the moment, we're not all lucky enough to be able to meet up. As I say, I feel unbelievably blessed that was able to happen. But even if it's just online, even if it's picking up the phone, stay connected to like-minded people. And the other thing that's come up this week as well within the Sober Club is people having issues, in inverted commas, with family members, extended family, and sort of going to someone's house once you're sober and finding reactions that you just were not expecting from, I don't know, brothers or husbands, parents, or whatever it might be. Just extended family can have weird reactions to what you choose to do. It's a funny thing, and if we're not careful, we can really let other people's beliefs and opinions as to what we're doing affect us. And Again, I've said this a ton of times, but what you're doing is non-negotiable. If you're ditching the booze, and well done you, if you've made that decision, you're doing it for you and only for you. And yes, eventually everyone else will reap the benefits too. That's what's so fabulous. But right now, it is that, pregnancy principle. I didn't come up with that. I think Holly Whitaker came up with that, and it's just the best analogy ever. It's non-negotiable. You'll do anything while you're pregnant to protect, that your own health and well-being and that of the babies. And it's exactly the same. So don't enter into any arguments or discussions in the early weeks of sobriety, because other people will lay their stuff on you, and it's just absolutely what you don't need. Anyways, and the other thing that came up over our weekend was this sense of, what do we do with the shame? What do we do with that shame and guilt? Because so many of us have it, and we have it in bucket loads. Once we've ditched the booze and we're starting to feel, have that sense of clarity, and we're starting to have that beginning sense of self-love and self-esteem. And if you're at the early stages, you won't know what I mean yet, but trust me, it comes. It's then juxtaposed with these, in some cases, terrible feelings of, my God, what did I do or say to that person? What stuff went on when I was drinking? And it's so difficult to deal with that stuff. How do you forgive yourself? How do you make amends if you need to make amends? It's a tough one. And then in addition, there is the resentment that we're holding. We spoke a lot at the weekend about just trauma, really, because that's what it is. Trauma from the past, stuff that went on that's had a deep-rooted effect on us. And as that last little testimonial said, some of which may even be the reason we did decide to numb everything out through drinking. So these resentments can feel, really, really big. So that was another thing that we discussed. We ended up, straying into a lot of topics, and I think, again, that the main thing of it all was that sense of connection. You can't go away from a retreat having solved all of your issues, but you can definitely go away feeling stronger and connected, and that other people understand, and that's so beneficial. We are naturally meant to be social beings, and when someone else understands or has empathy for you, and just that sense of accountability, you're going off with your toolkit and your decisions that you've made, and people did make really very important goals and decisions, and you're going off with those decisions and with your toolkit of resources, and you know that other people are going to hold you accountable. There's something magical about that, and exactly that's happened to me, actually, because I've taken on a new challenge as a result of last weekend, which I'll share with you at some point. But right now I'm still in the very early stages, and trust me, it's raw and difficult. The only reason I'm sticking with it is because I told these women I would. So, I've got to go through with it now. So anyways, I hope some of those ramblings help, whatever behaviour change you're making. And we do have another retreat booked at Champneys in January, 16th and 17th, I think it is, 16th of January. Obviously, very limited spaces. It's not on their website at the moment, but you can book. So what you need to do is go to thesoberclub.com, click on events, and that will give you all the information as to how you can ring up and secure your place if this kind of thing, if it resonates with you, if you like the idea of what we did. So in line with all of that stuff I've just been talking about, particularly this resentment that so many people carry, this trauma that we carry through our lives, I thought it would be great to interview someone who specialises in forgiveness. It's massive. It's an emotion that we often don't kind of deal with. So anyway, to that end, Kate Moryoussef is an emotional freedom and wellbeing coach. That's an EFT coach. And she has this special interest in forgiveness. And I love her approach. Very gentle, very laid back. We have an interesting chat, I think, which I think will challenge you, to wonder whether in your own life you're holding on to resentment it would just be so beneficial if you could let it go. And we touch also on this tricky issue of of forgiving ourselves. And of course, that can be a big one. We're going to be talking about the sometimes tricky topic of forgiveness. And my guest is Kate Moryoussef. I hope I've said your name right, Kate. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Lovely to chat to you. Now, I know you're a coach and a EFT practitioner, emotional freedom technique practitioner, and you have a podcast as well. Ambitious Mum, is that right?
Yeah, the Ambitious Mum podcast.
Great. Yeah, okay. Well, we'll talk about all of that, I hope. But I just want to dive right in to start with and just ask you about your journey, and particularly why forgiveness is something that you're focusing on.
Yeah, I mean, forgiveness for me was I went down a healing journey for myself with that. And I see it a lot with my clients as well, especially working with EFT, which is emotional freedom technique. It's tapping on different meridian points around your body and your face, and using a lot of acceptance, acknowledgement, validation of how we're feeling. And we harbor a lot of anger, pain, resentment within us, within our bodies. And very often, if we're not aware of it, it just lies dormant. And very often it manifests in physical conditions such as, neck, back pain, gut problems, IBS, migraines. And very often we don't make the distinction between the fact that we are carrying a lot of an emotional load that potentially has been with us from childhood, and it takes us through to adulthood, and we're just collecting more and more pain, and we don't realize the importance of releasing that pain, and learning the importance of healing as well as we go along. So we're sort of collecting a lot of rubbish as we go, and until we use a filtration process through the tapping, through the forgiveness work, we'll just keep collecting it and feeling worse and worse. So I would say I went through a forgiveness process about my childhood. My parents got divorced. We moved countries. It wasn't easy. Lots of things happened throughout the years. And I couldn't understand why I was harboring resentment. I couldn't understand why it was there. Because I thought, I've got a happy family and I've got kids and I've got, on good terms with my parents. But I was resenting a lot of stuff that happened in my childhood. And until that awareness had come in, and I'd really sort of touched on that and told my story and recognized there was validation in the pain, because very often we don't realize, that was in the past, or, that was just something small that happened. Or sometimes it's something really big and you feel like you can't talk to anyone, and it just goes round and round in your head. So forgiveness is something for us. It's not for anyone else. It's not condoning an act. It's not trying to reconciliate with the perpetrator or whoever. It doesn't mean that you're going to be on bad terms with that person, but you have to come to terms within yourself to be able to make that choice to move forward and not live in the past, which unfortunately a lot of people do. So we feel like we're living in the present, but actually, any trigger, no matter how small, can just take us straight back to a childhood moment. Someone said something to us, a divorce, we can't move on in our relationships. So yeah, as humans, we've got a lot of baggage, and we need to learn or unlearn how to deal with that. And we're not taught about forgiveness as children.
No, not at all. And it is interesting, isn't it, how an emotion can have such an impact on health and well-being, and the connection between adverse childhood experiences and childhood trauma and addiction is absolutely huge. I was blown away when I heard Gabor Mate talk about this. Isn't it fascinating? I can't remember the statistic, but it's something bonkers. Like 90% of people who I won't try and say the statistic and get it wrong, but you know what I'm trying to say. When there's adverse childhood experiences, and you're carrying stuff, and that, by the way, is not always the massive stuff. Because I think for ages I thought that I used to, I wasn't abused, so therefore everything was fine. But it can be small things. It can be, linked to the way you felt. Anyways, it's a very long-winded way of saying, isn't it incredible the impact that not being able to let this stuff out has on health and well-being, and turning us to drugs.
I think absolutely you're right. And we have something within us called a trauma capsule. And that capsule is within us, and we could have several different ones throughout the years. The beliefs, the stories, the things we've been told, different things that have gone on in our lives. And we retain these capsules. And we think that they're buried, gone, if we don't pick it, it's not there. But if something happens when we're an adult, it makes us feel how we felt back in childhood, all of a sudden that trauma capsule's opened, and we straight away go back to that feeling that we did, of feeling neglect, abandonment, hurt, pain, whatever that is. And so we have to learn to clear that, because it's very difficult to move forwards. And very often with clients of mine who I see, they don't connect what's going on right now in their present day with something that happened in their childhood. And we can't clear anything that's going on now until we clear what's going on, what happened then. And that's why inner child work, reparenting, things like that are such important practices. I don't know anyone, no matter, who looks very clear-headed and stable, that hasn't got something in their past that needs to be cleared and sorted. And we've got lots of old beliefs and stories going around in our heads.
And certainly, we talk about these ones from childhood, because obviously we've all got lots from adulthood as well. But if we just look back to the childhood ones for a moment, it's interesting that your podcast is, for mums, and you do a lot of work for mums, because of course, as mothers, we then now carry a whole load of guilt as to what trauma we're inflicting on our kids. And I remember when this first hit me, I one of the things that I've done that was massively helpful for me was family constellations, and we'll do something separate on that another time, because that's a huge topic. But when I first went to family constellations, I remember realizing the impact of all of this, and I've got 4 kids, and I felt blindsided by the responsibility. I mean, what the hell, on top of everything else, what is going to happen to these lovely kids, when they're in therapy? Oh my God. And all I remember is that what was super helpful was that the practitioner said to me, well, the more work you do, the less they have to do. And I thought that was huge.
That's really profound. I really resonate with that, actually.
But how do mums do it? How do mums deal with? I mean, we'll go back to talking about us in a moment, but just briefly, what do we do then in terms of not wanting to pass this stuff on?
I think it's a lot of self-compassion, self-kindness, self-love. And I know these words are bandied around quite a lot. They're quite sort of trendy. You see them all over Instagram. But essentially, if we're not talking to ourselves nicely and we're not looking after ourselves, then that is going to have a knock-on effect to our children. And so for me, especially with the podcast, it's all about empowering other mums with the knowledge, information, insights, wisdom from other women who are maybe a couple of steps ahead, or they do it as well, within their work, and they help other women. And I feel like we all have this responsibility now, because we need to be looking out for each other. And I think the days of kind of this competitive women thing, I think, is over, and we're all about, collaboration and working with each other and recognizing when someone needs a lift up. And I think from an internal perspective, we need to be watching the words that we use to ourselves. We need to be watching the thoughts, how we choose to reframe things. And I've done a huge amount of work on this myself. I was a young mum. I had my first child at 25. And as I mentioned before, I've got 4 kids myself, and I feel this huge burden of responsibility not to pass on any generational, I wouldn't say the word trauma because that's a bit excessive, but things that have been picked up throughout, my family, that I didn't like when I was a child. And I put a huge amount of pressure on myself to ensure that that doesn't get passed on. So I do prioritize my own self-care for that reason, because I don't want my kids, I think all children eventually will, look at the way they were parented and think, well, they could have done better. I think that's just standard. But if you've got powers and you've got tools within you, then you definitely doing the right thing. And I think self-compassion is definitely one of the best tools I would recommend. And that's something that you have to practice and learn. And it's not just something that comes out of nowhere.
Yeah, of course.
And you might have been spoken to as a child without any compassion. And so the only way you know how to talk to yourself is the same way that your parents spoke to you. You're not good enough. Who are you to do that? You know, be quiet, stay in that corner. All the different things that potentially we might have heard, or why are you trying that? You're rubbish at that sport. And it pops out of your mouth as a parent. You know, you've got to be so conscious of it, because we carry that load as adults, and that gets passed on to our children.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you know, it's completely true. And when we talk about sort of doing this work, this forgiveness work, do you think it's important to sort of to have to remember every situation, or, you know, do we have to kind of relive any of the pain? I mean, as a rule, that's what I love about EFT, is that it can be quick.
Yeah.
But, you know, do we have to kind of notice what's going on and then try and equate it to a specific thing that happened in the past?
So, like you said, EFT it's quick, efficient. One of the biggest benefits of it is that you don't have to rehash everything and talk about everything in minute detail. But with regards to the forgiveness, so I do work with the EFT, but it's also with the forgiveness coaching side. It's you know, we've spent such a lot of time rehashing things in our heads and going round and round and round the whole time, that it's, yes, you need to tell your story. That it's really important to have, whether you want to write it out, you want to speak to somebody, you know, confidentially, but it's really important to be able to actually acknowledge what you went through, and you know, have that validation that there is a reason for the hurt. But I wouldn't say going over every minute detail and talking about he did this and she said that. And it's making that choice to move forwards. It's making that choice to recognize what happened, bring awareness to the situation, bring awareness to how it's made you feel and where the pain is, where do you feel it. And, you know, there's a huge correlation between forgiveness work and improving mental and physical health. We don't realize, I mean, it's so simplistic in its terms that, you know, lack of forgiveness equals stress, the cortisol in your body, that we know that has an impact on heart disease, blood pressure, diabetes, depression, all those things. But if we release that negative energy from sort of a more of a spiritual perspective, we are freeing. We're sort of opening our hearts out, and we're sort of releasing that, and we're embracing more love, and we don't have to speak to that person again. We don't have to condone what's happened, but we are bringing more freedom to ourselves, inner peace, and that in turn has a massive impact on our health. And there's been huge studies, and I've got Dr. Fred Luskin's book right here in front of me, and he is a Stanford professor, and he has done huge amounts of work on forgiveness, and he's done loads of scientific studies on the impact of forgiveness on physical health, to the point where it's, you know, you can't be disputed.
It's a bit like kindness, isn't it? You know, the way that kindness is good for you, both for the person receiving, but also scientifically proven for the person giving as well.
Yeah.
But you know, I totally hear what you're saying. But what about when something is really raw and you don't feel you can forgive? Where do you go with that? Is it a case of sometimes that, you know, time has to elapse between whatever's happened and the forgiveness?
So I think that, listen, if it's very raw, sometimes time, you do have to sit with it. You know, if it's just happened and you just can't go there, then that's okay as well. It's accepting your feelings, it's acknowledging what's happened, and again, bringing in that self-compassion, that kindness, and acknowledging that at the moment you're not ready to forgive. And I think a lot of the time we do know when we're ready to forgive. Most of the time it could be, you know, something that's happened a long time ago, and we've been harboring this grudge, we've been holding on to this resentment, and we're recognizing, I hope with sort of awareness, that it's not so serving us in life. You know, we're not able to move forward, we're stuck in a cycle, whether that's self-sabotage, it's abuse, you know, alcohol, drugs, whatever. It could be, you're not able to move forward in a relationship, work-wise, financially. There might be lots of ways it's manifesting in your life. You feel blocked, you feel stuck. And it does take that awareness of going, okay, what is it? And I'm, and you could be recognizing that you are living in your past, and you have to make that choice. No one can do this for you. I can't turn around to a client and say, right, today is the day you're going to forgive. And she's still holding on to that resentment. So it is a choice, and you have to be brave, you need to be strong, and you need to be able to recognize what's over the bridge. It's almost scary to know that you're going to be releasing this. We're comfortable with our feelings, we're comfortable holding that grudge, we're comfortable being in that place because it's known. But we don't know how we're going to feel once we release that. Maybe a relationship might finish. Maybe we don't want to speak to a certain family member once, we've done that. So it's a lot of the unknown, but life is about evolving. It's about moving into, a bit of discomfort to take us to the next level. And we shouldn't be stuck in the same place. We should be recognizing that constantly moving and evolving is good for us, and we need to be challenged.
Yeah. How important is it to have sort of rituals around this? Should we be writing a letter or having a fire ceremony where we burn something, or is it important that we have some kind of action along with the thoughts?
I think, listen, writing a letter is cathartic, and I would always highly recommend writing stuff down. People talk about journaling. I find it very effective myself. If you're really stuck in your head, if you're that type of person, or maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to somebody about it, writing your story out, really saying how you felt at the time and how you're feeling now, and just, bearing your soul to paper is very powerful. I would recommend, if you wanted to keep it or you burn it or rip it up, that's fine. However you want, there's in different religions, there's lots of different rituals around forgiveness. I'm Jewish, so we have Yom Kippur once a year, and that is very much about recognizing what you've done in that year, and making a decision to move forward, with almost like a clean page for the next year. And we know that we've got that every year. We know that we can seek forgiveness, forgive others, and move forward. So I think, there's rituals, and that's a nice way to look at it, that you can do. But I would definitely say writing is a huge, and tapping for me is, always go back to the tapping.
Yeah, fantastic for releasing things. I mean, it's interesting. I also do some EFT with clients, and I find it really interesting because just the kind of setup phrase where before you start the tapping, where you encourage people to say whatever the issue is, and then I love and accept myself. Even that bit, some people can't get beyond, actually, because they don't accept themselves, and this is where we sort of have the problem right there, isn't it? And it's always so fascinating when people are trying to ditch the booze. I find that we very, very quickly get to the real issues, and they're almost in every case around lack of self-esteem and self-love. And as you say, so much of that tracks back to these resentments. So if people find this really hard, if they know that they're kind of walking around like just a ball of anger and resentment, where would they even begin to start?
Well, I think going back to it, it's definitely awareness. So very much, a lot of people will be walking around this ball of anger, resentment, and they're taking it out on family members. They're hitting, the drink. They are unhappy at work. Their children are suffering, but they won't know why. They just think that's life. They just think that's just the way life is. Life is hard. Life should be, tough. They've seen it with their family. Their parents have struggled. So that's just the way life is, and they should struggle. But actually, once you step out of that bubble of what you believe your life should be, you recognize, actually, I can do something about this. There is, help out there. There's, all sorts of different people that they can go to. Books, podcasts, just start small. Just start with the curiosity of potentially I could move out of this. I can be healed. And there are so many resources out there that are free. You know, if you can't afford to go to counsellors and practitioners and this and that, then you can listen to podcasts. And I've learned huge amounts from podcasts. Books, I buy everything secondhand, books on Amazon, you know, so I've got, and what I love about that is that people have done all the kind of
I like
the
that
pencil
too.
underneath the key points for me. And then you can do the inner work yourself, making sure, like going back to self-compassion and recognizing where you know, are you moving? Are you exercising? What are you eating? What are you drinking? These small steps to taking you to the next step.
Yeah.
And then it's, you know, making that connection between is this something that happened in my childhood? Is this having a knock-on effect to my life right now? And what can I do about that? And empowering yourself to go there, because it's all within us. And a lot of people need external validation. And actually, we have all the answers within us. We just need someone, you know, to tease it out. And you know, as you know, with coaching, that we just need someone to tease it out, because very often we block what, you know, are the answers, but they're all there.
It can seem very obvious for other people, can't it?
Yeah.
Not for yourself. What about for anyone who's thinking, well, that's all very well, but I need someone to forgive me, you know, for stuff that I did, you know, potentially years ago. How do we deal with that one?
Yeah, I mean, self-forgiveness, I actually think that's harder, because we carry around the guilt and the judgment and the self-judgment and the self-criticism. And actually the opposite of self-compassion is self-criticism. And so if we are constantly beating ourselves up and telling ourselves that we're not worthy of forgiveness, then it's very hard to bring any form of compassion to ourselves and then to others. So we have to start within. And again, going back to, you know, living in our past, we have to make a choice. So we can either choose to live with the guilt and the self-judgment, and that can just be, you know, that's it for the rest of our lives. Or we can recognize that that's what happened in the past and I'm not that same person anymore. Whether or not you feel comfortable reconciling with that person, writing them a letter, picking up the phone, but even just the acknowledgement that you're ready to move on, or writing that letter from an energetic perspective, something, it depends how spiritual you are, but something shifts. You know, very often there might be some strange coincidence, in inverted commas, or synchronicity, that that person might get in touch, or that person, there might be some form of sign that it's okay to move on, that we are allowed to move on. And, you know, you've got to make that choice yourself, because no one else can do it for you. And we have one life to live, and it's a very precious life. And we can either choose to embrace joy and happiness and evolving, or we can choose to just stay stuck and be miserable. And unfortunately, it's internal. We all have to do that.
So for someone who, you know, because this happens a lot, as I'm sure you can imagine, you know, when people have stopped drinking, when they, you know, when they're, I don't know, a few weeks, few months in perhaps, and they're starting to feel better and they're starting to see things differently, it can really hit you like a ton of bricks, the stuff that went down when you were drinking. And the stuff that you said to other people, and the stuff that you did, and on and on and on. You know, it can actually feel like a weight crushing you, actually, at that point. So I think you're right. You know, we have to. I did this great interview with Carla McLaren that I refer to quite a lot. She talks about embracing all emotions, and actually we even have to embrace this one. And as you say, I suppose sit with it. And I suppose we have to ask, what can we learn from that?
Exactly.
But then, as you say, you have to make that tricky choice. In some cases, actually, you probably do have to pick up the phone or write a letter. I mean, that's tough, isn't it? That's really
very
tough.
hard. It is really hard. And I'm not, you know, belittling that, and it is. But if you want to move on, and definitely what you said about taking learnings and flipping it a little bit and recognizing, would you be the person you are now? Would you be the strong person, the brave person? Would you be the parent that you are now if you hadn't gone through what you'd gone through, or you hadn't behaved the way you did and recognized, no, it's time to change? So there's going to be learnings and gifts to take from all of that, no matter how bad it was in the situation. And it's just going back to the self-kindness as well, and talking to yourself like if you sort of embody the wisest, kindest person that you know, and really think about how they would talk to you. We kind of have to internalize that voice and switch on that voice, and the other voice that tells you that you're not good enough and who are you to change, and you'll always be the same person. That voice has to be the quieter voice, but it takes time.
Yeah.
And you have to, I've got 2 dogs, and I go and walk my dogs, and I literally have a conversation with myself. And if I need to pick myself up, if something, not quite gone the way I wanted it to, I have to make that choice to listen to that kind, wise person, and not the person that's telling me, just give up, Kate, because, what's the point, and it has to be that kinder, wiser voice that takes over. And I think also it's gratitude and thankfulness of all the small things that are going right for you in life, and not going back to being pulled back into that negative energy of victimhood, because very often we can kind of play the role of the victim, and that suits us. We get a bit of pity, we've got self-pity, everyone else is wrong, we're right. This happened, so I did that, and they just, we can justify it. But we don't want to live in victimhood mode, because that doesn't empower us, that doesn't help us at all, that kind of just keeps us small. So it is a lot of self-awareness, and writing stuff down is an amazing tool, because things come out of you that you didn't think were there. And I would say and that's when you start recognizing when you're in victim mode, when you're not being grateful. Even if you feel like you've got nothing to be grateful for, there will be something, whether it's you've had a hot coffee that morning and the radiator's working, and whatever that is. Those are the little things that we need to grasp onto, because especially in these times when it feels like the world's caving in and life can be very tough for a lot of people, we do need to embrace whatever good we can find.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember years ago, just back on the forgiveness, years and years ago, I had a situation where, without going into detail, obviously, I was treated badly, really, really, really badly, and it really affected me. And of course, what's interesting when I look back is I remember that although there was no doubt at all that the person who treated me badly was in the wrong, in inverted commas, absolutely in the wrong. It was really hideous behavior, and I was absolutely kind of crushed by it, really. But I remember that a lot of my thoughts were that I must have deserved it, and I must have done something wrong. And it's really interesting how these emotions all merge together. It's very rare that we can just sort of go, oh, well, you're behaving badly, but, I'm not going to let it affect me. Most of the time, actually, we think we've deserved it. Certainly children do. And that's one of the issues, isn't it? You put children, I've heard people say this, in family constellations, things that I've done, that so often, if there's stuff going on with parents, children try and carry it. They try and carry it for the parent, Anyways, what was I saying? So I remember, looking back now, I remember that I was an absolute mess at that point, because I was being treated badly, having this, kind of hideous stuff going on. But at the same time, I was actually beating myself up as well on top of it all, for whatever part I may or may not have played wrongly, Anyways, to cut a long story short, I eventually kind of was able to step away from the drama of it and create a bit of a boundary. So I was able to do that. I did speak to a couple of people who were amazingly helpful, and I was able to just step away, put the kind of boundary up, and that helped a lot. And I got, goodness knows, a long time after, gosh, it might have even been a year after, I received a text from this person, and it would simply had the Ho'oponopono, which I'm sure you can explain, chant written on it. That was it.
Wow.
And it was really, really powerful, because what was quite interesting, well, I'm going to be completely honest here. What was interesting was I didn't necessarily immediately feel, everything's great now, I've forgiven you, if you sort of mean. I'm such a horrible person, aren't I?
No, not at all, because
I'm being really honest, because I didn't necessarily immediately feel that, but what I did feel was a strong sense of, I'm so happy for this other person that they had released it.
Yeah.
That was the main feeling for me. I felt such gratitude for them that they'd been able to release it, because to have been carrying that must have been awful.
Yeah, it's very powerful, that.
Just explain it for anyone who hasn't heard it before.
Yeah, so it's I'm sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you. I think that's right.
I think, isn't it? I don't think, does it matter? I don't know if it matters, does it? I thought it was, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, thank you.
Okay, so you got the text, but it's essentially those 4 lines.
Yeah.
And those 4 lines are really powerful from an energetic perspective, that it's basically the 4 most fundamental things that we can do. And it's the actual ritual is saying it over and over and over again for, it could be like an hour or 2 hours at a time. I've actually used it with tapping, and it's actually been a really nice exercise. So you can do it sort of for about 5 or 10 minutes, just going over those, those 4 lines. But you must have also felt validation.
Yeah, I did. Absolutely.
That your hurt and your pain was real.
Yeah.
And that person clearly was going through, and this is where the compassion comes in, and the empathy.
Yeah.
That person clearly might have been going through some difficult things that they, and they've had to do the inner work themselves. And the compassion really helps, because you can recognize that other person as you, or you recognize that person is a human, and none of us are perfect, and we're all interconnected. And there may have been some big stuff going on for that person at the time, which made them behave the way they did. And the more we flex that muscle, this forgiveness muscle, the easier it is to forgive ourselves, to forgive other people. And it doesn't go away. People are always going to say something, or the situations are going to happen where you can either make that choice to hold on to it, keep on, the resentment, the grudge, or you can be, go back into that mode of, that person's clearly going through something. That person, is not in a good place. I can either hold on to it and go over it and rehash it and keep that in my head, or I can make a decision to move forwards. And again, there's very traumatic things that people can't forgive. But if there's a place that they can go to that isn't anger, resentment, contempt, and it's a little bit, they move just out of that, then it's not having the same impact on their health and their mental health.
Yeah.
So it's very much, is it better to be right, or is it better to be happy? And
actually, interestingly enough, I've just been on my retreat that we just did with some Sober Club members. What came into my mind, I can't remember the conversation, but what came into my mind was something I'd read years and years ago by Susan Jeffers, the author of Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway, a real classic book. And she wrote somewhere, and it's this phrase that's always stuck with me: don't be right, be kind. Wow. That's amazing, isn't it? Amazing.
I mean, we all like,
we like to be right.
Like being right.
Definitely.
Everyone does. But is it a nice feeling to be self-righteous? No. Is it a feeling to be like, okay, you may know that you're right, but let's just drop it and just try and bring in a little bit more love to the situation.
I think it's the compassion, as you say, is the key here, isn't it? The compassion is just absolutely at the core of it, and it worries me sometimes that that, as you said at the beginning, this should be taught in school. I mean, it absolutely should be taught in school. I read somewhere, there was a report a couple of weeks ago in the press where someone had done studies on people who drink alcohol, and they'd actually studied their brain. I think they'd probably showed them images of people, I don't know, injured or upset or something, and it was unbelievable, the difference in the empathy levels of the people who had been drinking and the people who hadn't. I mean, we're not just talking people who were completely blotto drunk, so clearly they wouldn't be able to see anything, but just people who drank regularly and had something to drink. It either took a while, took far too long for the empathy to kick in, or it didn't kick in at all. And I do find that really scary. Also, with kids and kind of computer games, they reckon that has an effect on empathy. Yeah. How frightening is that? I'm starting to sound like my old aunt now.
No, well, I see it. I see it with my young kids when they're on the iPads and everything, and they fly off into a rage. Whatever is going on, there's some, stuff going on in their brains that is shutting lots of, the good stuff off, and they are more prone to flying into a rage, having a tantrum, being rude. And then on, we're sort of going off in a tangent here, but if I sort of take their iPads away from them and they will have a fit and they'll, have a tantrum, and I'll say, right, we're going on a walk, and they'll kick off for the first 5 or 10 minutes of the walk. But after that, they're like chatting, happy, friendly, everything. They've even said sorry, that, they've recognized that the way they behaved wasn't right. So yeah, there's a huge connection to that. And it's just knowing how to bring those stress levels, those cortisol levels down. And I really believe that they should be teaching this at schools. And I think that they will be, but we're not quite there yet. Yeah. Children need to be recognizing how they can help themselves, and to almost be one step ahead of what's going to happen, and then going, oh, okay, so I've been taught that this is how I should be behaving. And then going back to the forgiveness, like I said before, it's going to be there forever, until we take our last breaths. We are going to have to be flexing this muscle, and the more we flex it, the quicker we'll get to that point, and we'll understand that this is, I need to dip into my forgiveness pot. Okay, this is what's going on. And so I just think it's so important.
So tell us about your courses then, Kate, and the work you do.
Well, so I'm launching tomorrow my first workshop series called Forgiveness for You, and that's just a 3-week workshop series where I'll be taking people through the process of forgiveness.
Excellent. Kate, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you also for doing an extra little exclusive bit for Sober Club members, a lovely forgiveness ritual. Don't forget, we'll be opening again at some point, so make sure you register your interest. We've got a little self-care and sobriety PDF to give away, or a track your mood guide if you're looking at the nutrition piece. So if you just go to thesoberclub.com, you can register your interest there, get on the waiting list. And we'll open up towards the end of October for anyone who has been doing Sober for October and wants to carry on. Because as you know, the Sober Club is very much about, what's next? Everything underpinned by sobriety, that health and well-being piece, that happiness, the meditation, the mindset. It's everything that we cover. We've had some wonderful guests recently as well, and I'm planning more. Talking of great guests, I was listening to someone else's podcast the other day, and heard Jay Shetty being interviewed. What a star. I mean, I know I'm late to the party. Everyone but me has been listening to Jay Shetty for years. But anyways, one thing that he said just totally stuck with me, his time acronym, if you like. So he says, if you can't do much, you can just remember these 4 things that are going to be important every day. And T is for thankfulness. I love that. I mean, how much do we talk about gratitude? And he agrees that something I've said a lot, which is be very specific about your gratitude. It's not just, I've got a lovely home and I'm grateful for my family. We need to really put the detail in, because otherwise it loses its impact. So thankfulness, just hugely important. I is for inspiration. And again, something I'm always encouraging people to do is in your toolkit, if you're ditching the booze, have some inspiration. Listen to a whole bunch of these podcasts and others. Listen to some TED Talks. Listen to whatever inspires you. But and of course, Quitlet is fantastic. So get inspired, because on the one hand, we need to know the logic around alcohol. So the books like Jason Vale, Kick the Drink Easily, and William Porter, Alcohol Explained, and Annie Grace, This Naked Mind, are just fantastic for just getting your brain in gear and letting you know in no uncertain terms that alcohol is bad for you. Let's just make that clear. But then after that, you need the inspiration. You need to know that there are people ahead of you who are going to convince you that this is really worth doing, so that when it feels hard, you hang on for that reason, because you're feeling inspired that that this could be the same for you. And then the M is for meditation. Well, of course, I've said many times, I came late to that party too, despite knowing all about it, because I couldn't meditate, because I wasn't authentic. But of course, I now know that meditation can be a walk in nature. It can be writing your morning pages, your journaling. It can be, just sitting and breathing. I've done another great interview with a woman who her thing is essential oils for meditation, and that's been a revelation. Anyways, M for meditation, and E, of course, is for exercise. Well, there you go again. I'm a little late to that party. I do my dance, I do my yoga, but I anyways, Jay said on this interview, it doesn't actually matter what you do as long as you move your body, and I would absolutely agree with that. So that's Jay Shetty's TIME acronym, which I thought was quite cool. So make sure you go to thesoberclub.com, click on events if you're interested in the Champneys retreat in January. Make sure you sign up to be on the waiting list for when we open up again. I've got some great guests coming up in the next few weeks. I've got someone coming up that I don't even tell you who it is, because I don't know if it's going to happen, but we're hoping it will. And if you've got any ideas for me for the podcast, do please let me know. And make sure you follow me on Instagram at Janey Lee Grace. And of course on Facebook at Janey Lee Grace Loves. You may also want to follow some of the links on Facebook through to my other website, where we've got some competitions. There's some competitions to win, a whole bunch of health and well-being stuff, but also some great alcohol-free drinks to be up for grabs. So it's just an enter, and you got to be in it to win it, and you just never know. Some great brands there. Actually, talking of brands, I must just say thank you to Naughty, who gave us some alcohol-free fizz for our Champneys event. It was the first time most of the women had tried the alcohol-free Naughty with their dinner, and they just absolutely loved it. So Naughty, thank you so much for that. We do appreciate it. And we also, on a completely different note, had some lovely skincare goodies from Willida. So thank you very much. I will see you same time next week. If you are struggling right now, if you sober October or not, whatever stage you're at, if you're struggling and you are actually thinking, I'm not getting this joy that she's on about here. We've all been in that place, and it's really, really tough. But rather than going within and just saying, right, sod it, I'm just not going to do it, just reach out for some help. Sometimes just speaking to somebody else or just connecting with someone else can make all of the difference and help you, really remember that you're worth it. So reach out. There's always someone there. You can email me. You can follow me. You can message me on social media. There's always tons of help. If you want more structured advice, or if you have other alcohol related issues, then check out Alcohol Change UK, because they have some signposts there to lots of other great resources. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Alcohol Free Life podcast, brought to you by the Sober Club. Please rate and review. And if you want support, accountability and inspiration, and you want to live your best life without the booze, check out thesoberclub.com.